As of making this video, there are 9 armor passives, and obviously you can only wear one armor at a time, so let's find out which armor is the absolute best that you should be wearing almost all of the time. It would be better if there were 10 armors so we could do a top 10 list, but we're going to do a top 9 tier list of the armor passives, and we're going to start right at the bottom with number 9. The electric conduit armor gets last place for me. Now, I know that it does have a niche use. I understand that if you get everyone to wear the armor, you can have some fun and do some memes with some friends. I don't discount that. That is fun that does exist. But for about 90% of your matches, especially if you play with randoms, this armor is almost never going to be used. And with the meta shifts after the last buffs to certain stratagems and weapons, I haven't even seen anyone use electrical weapons in probably a month. So this armor is just far too niche to be higher up on the list. It is fun to meme with friends, but in general, you're just never going to use this armor passive. For number 8, I'm going to put a controversial pick, and I know people are going to be upset about this one, but hear me out. The scout armor is going to be in number 8 for me. Again, it does have niche uses. The ability to reduce the range at which enemies can detect you by 30% does have some use, especially if you're solo helldiving or doing a stealth mission. And it does have a second ability, which is markers placed on the map, which will generate radar scans every 2 seconds, which is useful, but for most people, I mean, you can see the enemy patrols coming a mile away, so that one's not super useful if you're aware of your surroundings. So with it being partially useful and a very niche pick, I'm going to put it in number 8. I know some people absolutely love their scout armor, especially again if you're a stealth helldiver, if you're doing solo helldives, that is definitely one of the niche uses where it is powerful, but for most people just doing random games, jumping with random people, I just don't see this being useful enough to put it higher on the list. Number 7 is going to be the Servo Assisted armor. This one too has 2 passives. Provides 50% limb health, but that does not impact head or torso, and increases throwing range by 30% for stratagems, and I believe grenades as well. This one I'm going to put in the too niche to work category like the other armors that are this low on the list. The 50% limb health would be super helpful if it was head and torso, but it's not. It's arm and leg, and if your arm and leg break, you're going to stim anyways, so having a little bit of health there, well, you're already going to be hurt, so you might as well stim. You can already toss stratagems pretty darn far if you know how to throw them, doubly so if you have a jetpack, so having an armor that increases it even more, I just don't see a whole lot of uses for it. There are a few niche like bases where you'll want to be able to throw an orbital in from farther away, I can see that. And maybe with like level 10 coming, we have the big compounds, being able to toss stratagems over the walls and deeper into the compounds may be useful, but that's such a niche thing that's only useful a couple times in a match, if that. I just don't see this being worth bringing on every single mission. Next up, we have extra padding, which only has the ability to provide a higher armor rating. Now, if you watched my previous video on armor, you'll know that we found that heavy armor does make a huge difference, as well as Democracy Protects in survival if you're taking a ton of damage. So I do like the ability to wear medium armor and have it be heavy armor, or wearing light armor and having it as medium armor. That little extra bit does make a difference, and we did prove it makes a difference, and this is constantly available to you. It's one of those passive that's always working, and it's always working for you, so it is a good pick. I just don't know if it's good enough to take over other armors, because some of the perks on armors are build-changing legendary effects that alter your entire gameplay. That's why this is squarely at number 6. At number 5, we're going to go with Fortified. Further reduces recoil when crouching or prone by 30% and provides 50% resistance to explosive damage. Now, there's 2 bits of this that maybe aren't well known, so let's go over those. When I say explosive damage or explosion damage, that also includes spit attacks from bile or nursing spewers. That means this armor is not just useful against bots, it's actually useful against the Terminids as well. As for the other passive, it's unknown whether this is intentional or a bug at this point, but it seems to only reduce vertical recoil, not horizontal recoil. So it is useful, but it's not quite as useful as, say, Peak Physique, which does seem to do a little bit more for weapons handling, but that is its full intent. I'm a big fan of crouching and going prone, and I think that's a tool that not enough Helldivers utilize, especially for mitigating explosive damage, for aiming long shots. It is a useful tool in a lot of different scenarios, and I just don't see enough people use it. That's why I'm putting this armor here, is that to get the full effect of this armor, you're going to need to crouch and prone, and I just don't see most people using it. If you can master crouching and proning and still being mobile, this armor is powerful and worth taking. For slot number 4, we're going to put Engineering Kit. Further reduces recoil when crouching or prone by 30%. Hey, does that sound familiar? And increases initial inventory and holding capacity of grenades by +2. Now, we just covered the recoil and crouching and prone and all that, so I don't feel like I need to say that all again. So let's go with the grenades. Grenades are one of the most powerful tools in the game. In fact, they can be just as impactful as stratagems if you're using them at the right time. If you have all the Helldivers in one area and you have, say, a flamethrower Hulk sneaking up on you from behind, what might have been a team wipe and 4 lives wasted can instantly be saved by one good stun grenade. On planets that are overrun with spewers, impact grenades can instantly take them out, which again can save people in a jam, as well as prevent situations where you're getting pushed back because there's so many spewers that you don't know how to handle. Fire grenades, of course, are wonderful for creating diversions, or you can lock off entire areas as the creatures try and walk through them and slowly get burnt to a crisp. Smoke grenades, well, we don't talk about smoke grenades. Grenades are just that impactful. In fact, in my previous video when we went over armor, that's something I discussed on why it was so hard to talk about which armor helped you survive the longest, because things like having extra grenades, it's so hard to account that versus like Democracy Protects, because there are situations where the only way to survive would have been to have a grenade. However, there are other situations where the only thing you would have survived is Democracy Protects versus having grenades. So there's so many different situations, it makes it really hard to account for, which is why I put this armor higher up, because I do respect the power of the grenades, but it doesn't quite make the top 3, and here's why. At number 3, we're going to put Democracy Protects. 50% chance to not die when taking lethal damage, and prevents all damage from bleeding if chest hemorrhages. Now here's a powerful passive, something that is always active, is always useful, and will always be needed in a mission. There is not a single mission I have ever done where I have not taken damage. There are missions where I have not died, and partially thanks to Democracy Protect on those missions, but I don't think it's possible at this point to complete a mission 100% without taking any damage. And as we know, that damage sometimes feels completely random. Sometimes you get hit by a rocket and you go flying and you only take half HP. Sometimes they get a lucky headshot and you're gone in one hit. Sometimes you're getting snuck up on from behind by a spewer and you don't see it till it's too late. And Democracy Protects mitigates all of those situations. There's only like one niche scenario where you ever don't want to live through something, and that's if you're completely out of grenades, completely out of stems, you don't have your weapon on you, and you're out of ammo. I guess maybe it might be worth just respawning and getting all that stuff back. Outside of that, you always want to stay alive. That's like #1 objective, right? So this non-stop helps you do that. It is powerful, it is always active, and I think it's even build defining, or at least playstyle defining. The way people play with Democracy Protects is way different than the way people play otherwise, because you can take those bigger risks. You can stand out in the open. You can do a little bit more risky, stupid stuff because Democracy has your back. Number 2, Peak Physique. This one is so high not because it increases melee damage by 50%. That's mostly worthless. And that should interact with throwing knives. Come on, Arrowhead, that just makes sense. Make it work with throwing knives. However, the improves weapon handling with less drag on weapon movement by 30% is build defining. A lot of people will tell you that this is absolutely mandatory for builds where you're doing things like the heavy machine gun supply pack, or even the AMR supply pack build, or regular machine guns. There are a ton of builds that people use that passive alone in order to make it work really well. And we've done videos on both the heavy machine gun and the AMR and talk about how powerful and effective that is. And this being basically required for those builds to work at their peak efficiency means you're going to be using this armor a lot, especially if you're playing with those playstyles. It can completely change up your playstyle, it can completely change up your build. It is a wonderful armor now that it works. There was a period of time where I was suggesting not to use it because the passive was broken. However, that has long since been fixed, so I do endorse this armor as a build-defining, wonderful piece of work. but it's not as good as the number one. In number one, we have the Medkit armor. If you've been paying attention to the video in the background, you'll see that is the armor that I have been wearing, and that is pretty much the armor I wear in every single situation, every single dive. There is absolutely no reason to ever take off the Medkit armor. The passive of increasing initial inventory and holding capacity of stims by 2, and increased stim effect duration by 2 seconds. Mix that with the experimental infusions, and you're basically an unkillable Helldiver. There are no downsides to this armor. The ability to take as many rockets as you want to take to the face, the ability to get ragdolled around, the ability to just stand out in the open and take shot after shot after shot feels amazing. Basically, the only time you will ever die is if something goes completely wonky, like one of the Bile Titans launching you to space, or you do something incredibly stupid like I did at the beginning of this video, where I ran directly into a turret firing directly on you. And even then, that doesn't always take you out. Again, sometimes things are a little lucky, sometimes they're not. There's a little bit of wonkiness when it comes to calculating damage in the game. And then on top of that, you can put the supply pack on this kit, and you have so many stims with that you're basically immortal for the entirety of the match. It feels wonderful, it's playstyle defining, and it is, once you try it, I almost don't want to recommend this. This is how overpowered it is. Once you try this, I don't think you will ever switch armors again. I think you will be a believer in the hideous green and white Medkit light armor. The ability to run the fastest in the game and absolutely take no damage is, there's no feeling like it. So use it at your own risk, Helldiver, because once you try it, you're never going to want to try anything else. And there you have it, Helldiver, the top 9 armors 1 through 9, and the passives. If you disagree, especially with Scout Armor, I know you're going to be out there. Leave a comment down below. As always, I like to make videos, talk about them, so if there's anything you want me to talk about, please leave it below as well. And as always, have a blessed day.